Hello, sacred beings of light and dark. Welcome back for week 13 of Solstice Echoes. We're now in that transitional phase between winter and spring, at least in the northern hemisphere. In fact, it's late at night here in that transition point. In about 8 hours, spring will occur, or at least based on our calendar season, spring will be here. It also denotes a time when the season of Pisces ends and Aries begins. So a new astrological cycle is also in process. But with the ending of winter, it reminds me of the things that we need to still let go of before we transition into the new growth cycle. And it reminds me of energies this week that were going back and forth or seemed backward and had to be recorrected or redirected around. In particular, I want to talk or tell you a story that occurred this morning and offer some reflections. My story starts very early this morning. I live on a property with a friend of mine in her converted garage ADU unit. And she has a couple of cats, and one of them tends to hang out in my space. And he also has a cat door in the closet that he can come in and out of. And an unfortunate nature of cats is they like to chase and kill things. Well, on this particular morning, he brought in a bird. And luckily, perhaps, the bird was still alive, and it started flying around the room. And it's very early in the morning, about dawn, or maybe a little before. It seems quite dark to me still, at least in my bedroom. And so I hurry to get the cat out and to close the cat door and to try to get this bird out who's flying on the ceiling and flying in particular towards the window. Obviously, the bird sees the freedom that is available to him and keeps trying to go in that direction. But he doesn't know that there's a window there. He doesn't know about windows and that they are a block. And that made me think of later of invisible blockages. So I'm trying to get this bird out. I know he's panicked by being captured once and quite hesitant about being captured by me. But eventually I get a hold of, I think, a leg and part of his body. And I'm able to open the door, and as soon as I do and let him go, he flies free. So that was great that this bird was able to be set loose and hopefully not too injured. I did see what looked like a puncture wound, but obviously the bird was active enough to be able to fly away. And so a friend and I wondered about, this occurrence of the bird and what the bird might be telling me. As I mentioned, or started to mention, there was the fact that there was this window that didn't seem to be a blockage to the bird, but in fact it was this invisible blockage that it didn't understand. Which makes me think of those blockages within our lives, the things that we don't perceive, either outside of us or inside of us, that prevent us from fully being free within ourselves, free to be who we are, and free to take our own paths in life. The other thing about the situation was that the bird obviously needed my help to get out. And this makes me think of the ways that we try to do everything on our own. And maybe that is a sense of freedom in some ways, but also that if we don't ask for help, if we don't have our community around us who could easily lend a hand, and we don't take that hand, we are limiting our chances of being redirected to a pathway that is freeing to us. These two reflections then made me think of a drawing I had done just the night before. I often like to go to a local pub chain, have a beer, and draw. It's a fun activity for me and a friend, or just even by myself. So I was drawing in the pub last night with no intention at all. So often I do hold an intention and draw. I don't ever, I'm always an abstract drawer, so I don't really ever have a product in mind when I draw. But last night, I had no intention whatsoever. I was just having fun making marks on paper, so to speak. But it's interesting how parts of that drawing come into what occurred this morning. So within this drawing, in particular, I want to show that I started to draw what I considered the peace symbol, because the person who created the peace symbol in the opposite direction has been noted to have been in despair at the time, which caused him to put the orientation in that way. But in, I think it's the runes that actually the symbol should be in an upright position, in a growth position like a tree. So anyway, this symbol to me means peace. But as I drew that, and I first thought that this was kind of a wave. So a wave of peace was the first thing that was coming up to me. But as I looked at it again, it also looks like a bird's eye. And so this is the aspect that seemed to come up in my drawing last night. This aspect of freedom and peace. Another aspect of the drawing here reminds me of some digital art that I did in 2017 that has recently caught my attention. And this particular aspect up here was about creativity coming to light. So that makes me think of spring and the creativeness of what can be grown based on what has been released in the winter months. So that regeneration of releasing and the space filling up with something new. Another aspect in this drawing is in the sky here, where I drew these stars, but in fact it reminds me of fireworks and Independence Day. So I thought these were some interesting aspects between the last couple of days, as I wasn't sure what I might be talking about this week. But the fact of freedom seem to have been coming to light. I think overall what we're really experiencing is some sense of coming back into ourselves, to finding those lost parts of ourselves, to recognizing what we really need in our lives to grow well, for our human lives to grow well. We've had 2 years of disruption due to the pandemic. And those 2 years have enabled us to think about how our lives are. We've had the space to have those reflections. And now it's more likely than ever, I think, that we will start putting into the physical realm some of these ideas that may have come to pass during the last 2 years as we waited for the pandemic to recede. So I welcome you into spring, into Aries season, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks for joining me today. Bye.